What's going on, guys? Happy Wednesday. It's time to make some PGA DFS lineups today, and I'm here back with another PGA ownership reaction, this time for the 2021 John Deere Classic for all of you guys. My goal, as always with these videos, is to help you identify the golfers that are being overhyped going into the event. Those are going to be my top 3 fades, as well as some of the guys being a little bit overlooked, my top 3 sleeper picks. As always, we'll be making these picks with my data-based approach, using custom modeling, visualizations, as well as some of the other techniques and tools I've learned as an engineer over the years and that I've been able to translate into the DFS sphere. Again, a lot of it's mathematically modeling based, a lot of it's using predictive trajectory analysis, all that kind of fun stuff that we use in engineering. So make sure to check out my channel if you're looking for that kind of analysis. I don't just cover the PGA Tour, I also do picks for the UFC, NFL, NBA, and more. I have it all on my channel, tons of it for you guys. I also just launched my Patreon for the PGA Tour. That was 2 weeks ago. On there I have my projections for every single player, all 156 for every single golf tournament. I also have their expected ownership, some game theory notes, and I'll be adding even more tools over the next few weeks to give you guys all kinds of data, all kinds of tools to make some lineups. So it's only $1. It's a super good value right now. You get access again to every single player's projection. I highly recommend you guys join and become part of the Gsluke community. With all that being said, let's hop into the top 3 fades and top 3 sleepers for this week's golf tournament. And starting off with my fades, at number 3 we have Beau Hossler coming in at a Draftkings price of $7,800 and an eye-popping 13.78% ownership. So Beau Hossler's been decent over the past few weeks. He has made his last 3 cuts. He has a couple top 20 finishes in there as well, but he's done it in a very unsustainable way. Over the last 3 weeks, he's gained over 4 strokes putting in every single performance. That's a little bit more expected from Beau Hossler. What's not expected is that he's been positive with his irons in every performance, and he's gained over 2 strokes off the tee in every performance. If we take a look at Beau Hossler's number over the entire year, he's losing strokes in every category but putting. That includes losses of over half a stroke on approach. He loses an extra 0.16 strokes on the bent grass surface that they're going to be seeing this week. So even his best weapon is going to be hampered. So with ownership approaching 14%, it's just going to take far too much allocation to get decent leverage on Beau Hossler. You're looking at playing 30 to 33% of your lineups in order to get leverage on him, and that is far too much. I mean, he's somebody who historically is not a very good golfer. He's in that 150 to 175 range, and even in a weak field like this, he should be priced down in that $6,800 to $6,700 range. And as a result, he's a fade for me at the John Deere Classic. My number 2 fade is going to be Cam Davis. My pick to win last week, ended up winning a lot of money on him, but here at the John Deere Classic, he's just not a good fit. So at $10,400 and 15.15% ownership, he's definitely going to be a fade. And we take a look at how his game fits this golf course. Again, like I said, just not very good. He's somebody who's more of a bomber off the tee. You know, he's somebody who gains all of his strokes with his distance, only hitting 55% of fairways, and that is going to be an issue this week at TPC Deere Run. Like I mentioned in my DFS preview, the fairways are tree lined. There's also going to be a premium on accuracy, especially if there's lift clean in place. There has been rain over the past few days at TPC Deere Run, so there's a high possibility of that. And on top of that, he's a very expensive golfer given the field strength. He's the 3rd highest priced golfer. We're used to seeing Cam Davis in the mid 7,000s. And yes, I understand it's a very wonky week. We don't have very many skilled golfers in the field. But Cam Davis is still overpriced. Even if we're trying to get over on him, we'd have to be in that 35 to 40% ownership range. And that's obviously way too much for somebody as volatile as Cam Davis. And for our number 1 fade, we have Daniel Berger. Coming in at $11,100, he is the highest priced player on the slate and also the highest owned player on the slate by far, coming in at 27.35% ownership, and this is entirely game theory based. At 27.35% ownership, you're looking at playing him at 65 to 70% of your lineups, and that is just not something I'm willing to stomach. Typically when I'm thinking about whether fading someone at the top or playing somebody that's expected to be relatively high owned, I look at their top 5 number and their top 5 odds and compare it to the amount of lineups I'd have to play him in. So we take a look at his odds. He's 9.5 to 1 to win. He's just a little bit behind Bryson's odds from last week. And as a result, his top 5 odds are still right around 3.3 to 1, something around that range. While those are pretty decent odds, if we compare them to the 60 or even 70% of your lineups that you're going to have to allocate, that's at least a 35 to 40% differential right there. We're looking for, obviously, those numbers to be the other way around. We're looking for your allocation to be twice what his odds would be. So it's just not worth it in this case. He's obviously a solid golfer. He's the number 1 golfer in my models for this week. But on a point per dollar play, he's not very good. He's just not worth that salary. And he's also not worth that ownership allocation. And now hopping into the sleeper picks for the John Deere Classic. At number 3, we have Brandon Hagy, a $7,200 golfer who's going to be owned to just 0.14% of lineups, less than 1%. Brandon Hagy's coming off a very good week as well, so it's a complete mystery to me, to be honest with you. At first, when I saw my ownership projection, I thought it was wrong. I went and cross-referenced it with a few other websites that I use for some analysis, and it's very consistent across the board. Nobody's playing Brandon Hagy this week, and for me, I'm definitely going to be all over him. Last week at the Rocket Mortgage Classic, he ended up finishing 6th. He had a very strong performance putting. He had a very strong performance off the tee, and that's what we're used to seeing from Brandon Hagy. He's somebody who loses a ton of strokes on approach, right around the 0.3, 0.4 mark per round, which is not great. But he does have that lethal combination, just like Bryson DeChambeau, Patrick Rogers, Scotty Scheffler, where it doesn't even necessarily matter how they're hitting their irons. They're just putting themselves in great positions off the tee. They're getting all of their strokes in those 2 categories. And if he's going to be owned at less than 1% ownership, it's just trivially easy to get leverage on him. I mean, you're talking about playing 3 or 4 lineups, getting plenty of leverage out of your 150, and again, I think it's just a slam dunk play. I mean, you could play him in 10 to 15%, even 20% of your lineups if you wanted to, and I think that would be a very sound decision. He has a very strong game for this course. He's also very comfortable on the bent grass surface, so I can't find any problems with him. At number 2, we have Troy Merritt, who is also somebody coming off a very strong performance. He's $8,700, going to be owned a lot more at 8%. But he's somebody who, was in the playoff last week at the Rocket Mortgage Classic. He ended up finishing 2nd place. And this isn't an aberration for Troy Merritt. He's been very good of late. He also has a 7th place finish at the Charles Schwab and Byron Nelson just over the last month and a half. And both of those courses are very good comparison courses as well. Both of them are scoring fests. Both of them are relatively short golf courses. And that's where we've seen Troy Merritt do well. We have another one of those tracks this week. He's been coming in on an absolute heater. So when I saw Troy Merritt in single-digit ownership, it's just a slam dunk play for me. A lot of people priced around him are in the 10, 15, even 20% ownership range. And in my opinion, they're worse plays. So he's going to be one of my highest owned players on the entire slate. He's going to be in the 30 to 35% range for me. I'm looking to get a lot of leverage if he has another good week, which is likely because we've seen he's been getting 1.25 strokes per round with his putter over the last 28 rounds. And if we narrow that down to the last 2 or even 3 events, he's gaining over 2 strokes putting per round. That's something that we haven't seen in a very long time. He's on an absolute heater of all heaters with the flat stick. And they say not to get up when you're on a heater. At number 1, we have Kevin Na. And yes, Kevin Na, he's $9,500 this week. He's only going to be owned in about 7.8% of lineups. And he's my number 1 sleeper because I think he has a legitimate chance to win, and nobody seems to want to play him. We've seen Kevin Na win more than a handful of golf events. We've seen him win on long tracks. We've seen him win at short tracks like we're seeing this week. And he's plainly a winner. We just don't see it coming when he wins because he gets that hot with his putter. In most of his wins, if we take a look at his wins, in 75% of his wins, he gains over 10 strokes putting. That's something that, you can't see coming. He just goes out. He makes every single putt that he hits. And in a field like this, he has a much higher chance of doing that than at something like the U.S. Open or something like the Open Championship where he has so many other great players in the field. But he's quite literally the 3rd best player in the field, in my opinion. I think you have, obviously, Daniel Berger, Sungjae Im. I think Kevin Na is the 3rd highest pedigree player in the field. Obviously, you could argue some of the other guys priced ahead of him might have a higher pedigree, but if we're looking at a historical baseline, he might even be the number 1 player in the field in terms of pedigree. The Las Vegas books have him about 35, even 40 to 1 to win this golf tournament. I hammered that as soon as I saw that. He's somebody who's historically great on the bent grass surface. He gains an extra 0.2 strokes per round putting on it. And this is also his best putting surface. I went and looked at all the different hybrids that we have on tour. This is by far his best split in terms of his historical baseline. So he's also had 3 of his wins on the bent grass surface. So overall, I really like his potential in GPP formats. You're not going to have to go crazy on Kevin Na to get leverage. I'm looking at playing him right around 25, maybe 30% of my lineups this week. Depends how it all shakes out tonight. But I love pairing him with either Sanjay or Brian Harman if you want to. That way, if he wins, you can maybe get another guy in that top 5 with one of those two. But I think he gives you a good chance at being unique. Again, he's low owned, but he also has a legitimate chance at taking down the John Deere Classic. That's all, folks, for my fades and sleepers for the John Deere Classic. Keep an eye out later today for a video covering the Scottish Open. There's a ton of the best players in the world playing for the event this weekend. I figured I'd try to get some content out as soon as possible. My top 6 picks for that event on Draftkings. So keep an eye out for that. It's going to be my first ever European Tour video. I'm also going to have a fantasy QB rankings video coming out on Thursday. I'm giving my top 24 fantasy QBs. It's going to be for ESPN scoring. It's essentially which order I would draft QBs. It's my pre-season rankings. A lot of drafts are starting in the next maybe 2-3 weeks, something like that. So I wanted to get that out there for your research and for your preparation for those drafts. Let me know in the comments for the John Deere Classic who your biggest fade is, who your biggest fade over, let's say, $9,000 is. If your guy ends up missing the cut, you're going to be entered into a drawing to win a free month of my Patreon. That's for my PGA projections. So make sure to leave your fade down there. And as always, make sure to like and subscribe, guys. It really helps me out with growing the channel. It also makes sure that you guys are able to see my content as soon as I post it. So it's a win-win. Let's go and click that now. Good luck with your DFS lineups. I think there's going to be a lot of money to be made at the John Deere Classic. Again, a lot of casuals still playing golf DFS, especially in post-pandemic times. So we can definitely take advantage of the research this week and make some money. So send me some messages on what you guys win, and I'll shout you guys out next week. Again, good luck. I'll see you tonight with the European Tour preview.